Sabo's forgotten past shaped who he became, but what if he never lost his memories at all? Imagine Sabo remembering Luffy and Ace from the very start. How different would their bond in the story of One Piece be? The day the celestial ship exploded under the weight of the cannon fire, Sabo didn't lose his memories, nor did he sink in the dark ocean just to be forgotten by fate. Instead, a massive gust of wind took him from the smoke, and the air brought him away like the breath of a dragon itself. He woke up on a ship that was full of red banners, surrounded by some of the rowdiest looking people with angry eyes, full of determination. Amongst them stood a man whose presence silenced even the storm itself. It was Monkey D. Dragon. As soon as Sabo woke up, he coughed, and his small hands were weak, making him stand up, with Dragon's shadow crushing him. Dragon would take a massive interest in the boy, recruiting him from the get-go. While the initial stages would be challenging since Sabo would be much more rebellious, he would slowly adjust. This time, he remembered everything. Ace and Luffy would still steal the sake cups and the vow they made, but Sabo also remembered the faces of the nobles, the sneer of his father, and the chain that bound his soul to a name that he now despises. But Dragon saw that fire, and under his leadership, Sabo grew up to be a badass weapon of rebellion. The Revolutionary Army became his new family, and his hatred for the Celestial Dragons evolved into a purpose. The goal was to get rid of this culture. There, he learned the art of silent strikes, reading the enemy's movements, and fighting with the ferocity of freedom itself. Every night, Sabo would stare at the stars, wondering if Luffy and Ace were also watching from afar. But things would change drastically by the time Sabo turned 15. He would no longer be a trembling boy of the Goa Kingdom, and now his blonde hair became shorter, with his coat carrying the very emblem of the revolutionaries. His staff would also exert an aura unlike anything we've ever seen before. But deep down, Sabo wanted to return somewhere, and we're not talking about nobles. He wanted to return to his brothers to pursue his dreams with them. Then came his mission to the East Blue, and it felt less like a coincidence and more like his destiny calling. Sabo accepted this mission without any hesitation. Fuchsia Village greeted him with a similar air. The forest beyond the Grey Terminal had changed a little compared to his childhood. The rough paths, the rustle of leaves, and even the far-off shouts from Dadan's hideout felt so nostalgic to him. He followed the sound of fists and laughter until he found two figures sparring in a tree. Ace was now much taller, with his movements refined, and Luffy, still reckless, was charging in like a complete badass. The two hadn't changed at all, and their rivalry still burned. The brothers finally reunited with Sabo, also fighting this time and getting into trouble. They spent the next days together on Dawn Island, and here, their shared vision became something bigger. Ace became their leader, and unlike Luffy, he smoked less impulsively. His strength was grounded in purpose rather than anger. He was preparing to sail, already planning the foundation of his own crew. Freedom was something that Ace loved, and the only thing he could do was keep his brother safe. Luffy, on the other hand, was unchanged in spirit, but his ambitions were even greater than before. He trained consistently, dreaming of conquering the seas. The crew would gather, and the impossible dream of becoming the Pirate King would start. Sabo would watch his brothers from the sidelines with a quiet sense of pride and fear. He knew that beyond the calm waters of East Blue was nothing but trouble. They shared everything with each other, trained each other, and Sabo told them about the celestial greed, how they needed to stop this culture, and how they could make the Marines the right people instead of getting manipulated by them. From there, the brothers separated, meeting again later. Ace started the Spade Pirates. Sabo secretly joined the Revolutionary Army as an official, and Luffy embarked on his next adventure. They said goodbye, promising to meet again someday. The years following Sabo's reunion with his brothers would reshape the pirate world, unlike anything we've seen before. In the shadows of the Grand Line, Sabo's name would start carrying weight. Within just a few years, Sabo would become Dragon's right hand and a strategist capable of commanding entire operations across the seas. The operations that made his rise were the raid on the Rosetta Archipelago, a celestial dragon-controlled zone that was used as a hub for trafficking human slaves. The mission here was simple: destroy the slave ring, free the captives, and erase all traces of the operation. Sabo would then go undercover with a small strike team of the revolutionaries into Fortress City. His mastery of Ryusoken, the Dragon Claw Fist, allowed him to crush steel cuffs and walls with fluid, circular motions. His hands glowed faintly with armament hockey that he had already learned, redirecting bullets and shattering armor with pinpoint strikes. But as the mission was nearly completed, Cypher Pole Zero agents intercepted them. These are the world government's secret assassins. Their leader was a masked operative wielding Shigen, a deadly technique that would make his fingers launch like blades through the air. He attacked Sabo, but was countered and twisted mid-air. His arm turned jet black as he deflected the thrust and drove his palm into the ground. The earth fractured, launching a shockwave that sent the agent backward. Two more CP0 operatives came, with their bodies enhanced with Rokushiki arts. The battle itself became super complex until Sabo met them all head-on, veins on his arms pulsing with hockey. He released Ryusoken, Ryu no Ken, the Dragon's Fist, and the impact sent the agents flying through 3 buildings, unconscious. Then he used his Dragon's Flame, the one that burned them down. He then used his flame again to burn the chains. Because of this, his fame drew attention, including that of Admiral Kizaru, who then intercepted Sabo during an extraction mission on the South Blue Coast. This clash was legendary, legendary as Kizaru, mocking as ever, unleashed Yasakani no Magatama, firing beams of light faster than the eye could see. Sabo moved instinctively, using his observation haki to read trajectories and counter with shockwave palms that detonated the ground around him. However, the power gap was unreal. As soon as Sabo was settling from the previous attack, one kick from the Admiral was enough to send Sabo into the ocean, making him suffer the worst fate. As he was about to die, Dragon came and rescued him from the ground. There, Dragon met Kizaru, who was in awe, seeing such a powerful opponent in front of him. With just Dragon's haki, Kizaru retreated as if he wouldn't see tomorrow. While Sabo was devastated by his loss, Dragon asked him to learn from it and become even stronger than before. And so, Sabo did. On the other hand, Ace was carving himself into a legend in the open seas. The Spade Pirates rose faster than any rookie crew did. Thanks to Ace's Logia fruit, the Mera Mera no Mi, he became the master of fire itself. He promised to bring freedom for all under his flag, and that's the main reason why most people were drawn to him. His crew wasn't bound by greed for more or fear. Rather, he was a loyal man who fought for their will to live unchained. But then came Ace's biggest challenge, Sir Crocodile, a warlord expanding his influence across Alabasta. Ace wanted to dismantle the slave trade operations, not knowing that his actions were matching with Sabo's mission elsewhere. Their confrontation was fiery. As soon as the battle started, the battlefield was not only blood, but also molten. Crocodile's sand regenerated endlessly, but Ace's fire was so intense that it burned all the sand into ashes. Crocodile, understanding the severity of the problem, used Desert Spada, slicing the earth open, to which Ace answered with his overpowered Enkai, Hibashira, which summoned a towering pillar of fire that burned through the attack. The heat reached blue intensity, similar to someone like Marco. In the final surge, Ace challenged his power into Flame Emperor, forming a massive sphere of condensed fire. And that was where Crocodile's sand barrier disintegrated instantly, with his base, the symbol of his hidden empires, burning until nothing remained but glassed sand. Ace was so angry that he killed Crocodile, making him one of the strongest to ever live. Ace sailed away, and his name spread through the Grand Line. Not as a pirate of destruction, but as someone who turned down the slavers and tyrants, freeing hundreds of sad souls. Upon hearing the news through revolutionary channels, Sabo recognized Ace's actions. Without ever meeting, they began fighting the same war from different sides. Behind the scenes, they were actually contacting each other through coded transmissions so they could avoid the Marines. While Sabo and Ace were battling against the world's darkness, Luffy's path remained one of adventure and simplicity. However, destiny itself began to bend around him. He formed the Straw Hat like always, sailing across the East Blue, defeating Arlong and claiming his first bounty. But what changed was unseen. Thanks to Sabo, the revolutionaries were watching him from the background, ensuring that Luffy was protected at all times. When Luffy reached Eni's lobby and challenged the world government for Robin's freedom, Sabo made his silent intervention. The Buster Call, known as one of the strongest forces, met an unseen enemy, the revolutionaries, who were disguised amongst the fleeing agents. Not only did they disrupt the Marine command systems, but they also jammed Denden Mushi communication, delaying Admiral response times. From there, Luffy escaped on the Thousand Sunny, where cannons fired from Marine ships kept misfiring, which was the work of Sabo's infiltration unit. In the chaos, Luffy's Gear Second ignited red steam across the bridge, and his blows broke through CP9's ranks. Sabo was watching Luffy from high above and was proud of how strong his own brother had become. By the time Eni's lobby burned, all three brothers had already marked their names on the world. One was in the light of rebellion, another was all about justice, and the one who was laughing for freedom was Luffy. Each victory, each battle, and each tough encounter pulled them closer to the storm that was yet to come. This was the war at Marineford, which was still inevitable. Here, they didn't know, but their paths would finally converge against fate itself. It all began with a message that whispered across the Grand Line. The message was about Portgas D. Ace's capture by the Marines when he fought against none other than Marshal D. Teach, the man who was once known as Blackbeard. The announcement shocked Sabo and reached the Revolutionary Army faster than any news network could carry. Sabo became quite angry, and the words public execution kept coming to his mind to the point where he took everything super personally. He asked Dragon if he was going to help his friend, and Dragon, initially skeptical, saw the fire in the boy's eyes that inspired him too. Within hours, the Revolutionary Army was in motion, where Sabo started gathering intelligence from every single port while tracing the routes of the Marines transporting Ace. They found one crucial lead. Monkey D. Luffy had already escaped from Amazon Lily and was heading straight towards Impel Down. It was destiny, as after a long time the brothers would meet, even if it was in this messed up situation. Luffy's descent into Impel Down was pure madness. The massive underwater prison, a fortress of stone and iron beneath the sea, was against pirates, and especially the strong ones who possessed a devil fruit. However, Luffy was completely unstoppable. His will to save Ace drove him through each level of horror. There were blazing floors of fire beasts, frozen caverns, torture chambers, venomous beasts, and standing in Luffy's way was one humble protector, the warden named Magellan. But this time, before Luffy reached the lower levels, the air above level 4 rippled with a burst of heat and a surge of wind. Just behind him was none other than Sabo himself, but Luffy did not know. The guards scattered as Sabo's dragon claw fist tore through the reinforced wall. walls. The sheer pressure of the boys' armament haki shattered spears and armor. He looked at Luffy, their eyes meeting through the smoke. Here, no words were needed. The brothers finally found each other in these difficult times. With Sabo's arrival, the prison raid became something else. It was a big mess. They couldn't even comprehend. Revolutionaries were disguised, and prisoners began opening cell doors, and chaos erupted throughout the entire facility. In canon, Crocodile was here, but in this storyline, Ace had already killed him, so it was up to Jinbei to join the fight. But this time, Sabo's presence kept the momentum under control, level by level. They climbed downwards until they reached the man himself, Magellan, who was fighting and stopping Luffy at this point. The Warden's Hydra, a venomous beast made entirely of purple toxin, devoured the steel as he appeared in front of them. His sole presence was so suffocating that Sabo, Luffy, and Jinbei had a hard time just standing. Here, Sabo told Luffy and Jinbei to move ahead, and he would be the one fighting Magellan. The air thickened with deadly gas, and every breath could mean death. Magellan attacked first, unleashing the Venom Road with his corrosive body, melting through iron. However, Sabo countered using his Dragon Talon Inferno. His flames, learned from years of refining the dragon's wind-based abilities, and Ace's fiery inspiration clashed against the liquid poison, causing a huge explosion. The heat neutralized portions of the toxins. For the first time, someone actually debunked how to stop this crazy warden. Thanks to his hockey-coated claws, Sabo ripped through Magellan's Hydra head. And here, we could see his movements were quite fluid, with a display of martial arts that he hadn't shown in the real storyline. After this, Magellan became angry and used Venom Demon, flooding the entire chamber in a tide of acid. While Sabo was worried, he didn't panic and used Heiken Ryo, a technique inspired by Ace's Flame Fist, combining compressed fire and air pressure that vaporized many sections of the poison. The walls also cracked under the heat, while Magellan was still standing strong with monstrous endurance. Their duel reached a stalemate. But then, Magellan unleashed a cloud of invisible toxic gas that filled the air. Frankie and Usopp, who were fighting to keep the lower doors open, noticed the gas spreading and acted. Usopp used his final Atlas Starburst to create a massive shockwave, blowing the ceiling apart, giving room for Sabo to escape. Frankie stayed beyond, activating his radical beam to detonate the incoming poison flood. This resulted in an explosion that rocked the entire structure. By the time Sabo woke up in the rubble, he saw that both Frankie and Usopp were dead, thanks to the spread of venom and flame. This shock froze Sabo, and for the first time, he used his haki while getting close to Magellan, killing him with a fire fist bigger than a 300-kilo boulder. Sabo rushed to Luffy with tears in his eyes to give him the bad news. Luffy and Jinbei had already sailed toward the battlefield, only second to Sabo, who was trying his best to catch up with Tears. They saw the Whitebeard fleet advancing from the New World. Revolutionary scouts hid amongst the chaos, and even Dragon's shadow was looming on the horizon. The age of war was coming. Then Sabo gave Luffy the bad news, which changed him in an instant. The smile on Luffy's face disappeared, but Sabo shrugged his shoulders, telling him that they must save Ace now or else, even though he would be killed. Luffy and Sabo arrived on the battlefield, and the platform was roaring from Whitebeard's Gura Gura no Mi fruit. Everyone was staring at Ace, who was chained and bleeding, watching the horizon. And when Ace saw two figures rushing through the battlefield, one with a straw hat and the other with burning fists of dragon fire, his eyes widened in disbelief. The brothers had come to the battlefield. The three of them were finally together again, on the battlefield that would decide the fate of the world. Luffy charged through the enemies with Gear 2nd Jet Gatling, smashing Marine ranks, while Sabo used the Flame Dragon Tornado, spiraling flames that turned cannon fire into ashes. Their teamwork flowed effortlessly, and even Whitebeard watched in silence as they unfolded their strength. The sky above Marineford started burning red as the Age of Pirates and the Reign of Marines collided with one another. The Whitebeard pirates had already breached the Marineford walls when the wind shifted. A fleet of Revolutionary Army ships also broke through the horizon with black sails marked with the dragon insignia of the Revolutionary Army. Now, the admirals were in play, and this war would turn out much more intense than the original one. First, Ace, even though he was heavily injured, started fighting Kuzan. Sakazuki tried interfering, but this time, Luffy and Marco were stalling him. Kuzan was calm and unreadable, but once he raised his hand, the ocean froze once more, turning waves into ice mountains. Kuzan's Ice Age was coming towards Ace, but he used Heiken, vaporizing into steam that covered the entire field. The two danced between fire and frost, with Kuzan encasing pillars of flame into ice, only for Ace to melt them instantly. However, even if Ace was one of the most formidable pirates the world had ever seen, Kuzan's experience wasn't something he could easily handle. With a strike of Pheasant Beak, he sent a freezing blast towards Ace, which pushed him away at least 100 feet. However, Ace was still standing with his armament haki igniting, allowing him to punch through Kuzan's ice prison. When the smoke cleared, both men stood. Ace was still burning hot while Kuzan was frostbitten. The match didn't clearly end, but it kind of ended in a stalemate when Jinbei intervened. On the other hand, Sabo once again fought Admiral Kizaru, who was ripping through the skies, chill as ever, kicking Sabo with Yasakani no Magatama, and each kick was complete destruction. However, Sabo countered it with Dragon Fang Barrage, with his fists wrapped in Busoshoku Haki that was so dense that they deflected the beams of light mid-flight. His strikes were rhythmic and brutal as ever. Even Kizaru was surprised to see how much Sabo had grown stronger in such a short time. That said, Kizaru disappeared and vanished in a blink, appearing behind Sabo. The battle became a blur of after images. Kizaru's teleportation against Sabo's predictive haki. While both were fighting evenly, Sabo was already very tired from his battle with Magellan, which he had barely survived, and then one final light kick sent Sabo crashing into a fortress wall with smoke rising from his burned armor. Even when he was broken, Sabo stood above, and he thought that unleashing one final strike would be a good idea. So, before falling down once again, he used Dragon's Breath Cyclone, a swirling inferno of wind and fire that sent Kizaru flying backwards. This was another stalemate, but Kizaru was just getting started. If he hadn't been interfered with by Mihawk, he would have killed Sabo. Lastly, at the heart of the chaos was Sakazuki himself, the man that everyone hated. Luffy came running towards him with Gear Second Jet Gatling that blurred through the air with a storm of punches colliding with Sakazuki's magma fists. Each impact cracked the battlefield, melting ice into rivers of lava. However, every single time Luffy was fighting, Sakazuki would absorb the very blows, countering with Mego, a hellish magma eruption that engulfed Luffy's chest and sent him flying away. They kept fighting, but Luffy's will to survive and to get revenge on his fallen teammates was too strong, which is where he used Gear Third Red Hawk. Suddenly, his fists were coated with armament haki and were red with his burning blood. They collided with Sakazuki's molten chest, and this shockwave was so strong that it gathered the attention of everyone. Luffy was about to be killed with a magma fist as he had already collapsed, but he was interfered with by Dragon, who gave him a big punch, sending him flying away only to be caught up in a battle with Marco. One of the strongest people had just arrived on the battlefield. Sengoku, seeing Dragon, transformed into his golden Buddha form, facing him alongside Garp. Father and son, two generations of conviction, collided in a battle that shook the world. Sengoku's shockwave palm was sent towards Dragon, but he easily scattered it with his wind tyrant fish. But suddenly, Garp's fists of pure will met Dragon's control of nature, and the old heroes started striking each other without slowing down. Everyone was fighting against each other, while this time, Whitebeard himself got angry and started quaking his way through the enemies, destroying them one by one. But as soon as Whitebeard was stabbed by one of his mates and betrayed shortly after he fell to the ground, and behind the shadows appeared none other than the annoying Blackbeard, who was going to steal Whitebeard's fruit. However, this time, Sabo interfered, kicking Blackbeard miles away from Whitebeard. His Yami Yami no Mi devoured light itself, creating a void that consumed any of Sabo's attacks. But Sabo's mastery of both haki and elemental fusion still kept him from being pulled in. Blackbeard then used Liberation, pulling in rubble and bodies at once, while Sabo countered him with Dragon's Wrath Inferno, a spiral of compressed fire and wind. This explosion engulfed both of them. When the smoke cleared, Sabo was bloodied and burned, half conscious but still standing. Blackbeard's body was scarred and his grin faded. His teammates pulled him back and they fled the scene. The war, though it felt won, still had the Marines there to answer. Dragon was handling himself well against the two badasses, but even he got temporarily overpowered by Garp and Sengoku. Sengoku then ordered a full-scale bombardment, and from there, pacifistas, vice admirals, and Cypher Pole Zero agents swarmed the battlefield. The pirates versus the Marines happened in the most intense way, which they didn't know before. But in the middle of the chaos, Nami, Robin, and Chopper were taken alive. Their ship was destroyed. Luffy, fighting with his burned arm, watched in horror as the Marines dragged his crew away, and Sabo was the one who pulled Luffy and Ace away from the madness, or else they would have been taken too. As the revolutionary ships vanished into the storm, Dragon raised his hands, but not just against the Marines, but against the entire world government. The only ones left free from the Marines were Luffy and Zoro. Zoro was taken away from Mihawk to train because he knew the mess that would come. As they were going away, the Marines once again started to attack Dragon's ships. But then came red-haired Shanks, the man who even the world government is scared of. He took care of the fight while meeting Sabo and Ace because Luffy was just unconscious. Shanks handed them over into the care of Dragon and told him that he would take great care of them. He also told Ace and Sabo to take care of Luffy and that there was a bigger storm coming, which they hadn't seen before. Saying that, Shanks left, and the battlefield cooled down for the first time in forever. The war was over, but it was still far from over. When Dragon brought the word of the captured Straw Hats, his voice fell, and he was painfully broken. Then came the names Nami, Robin, Sanji, and Chopper, all alive but imprisoned somewhere deep within the Marine strongholds. Remembering his friends Frankie and Usopp, Luffy had a huge breakdown, but this time, Ace and Sabo were beside him with Jinbei giving him some reassurance. After a few days, Luffy started returning to his old self while training with his father and opening up to him more and more. Dragon told everyone that there was someone above the celestial dragons, a shadow that rules the world from the throne of Pangaea Castle. He spoke a name no one had heard before, Imu. This is the secret sovereign of the world who has lived for centuries, manipulating kings, rewriting history, and maintaining balance through fear and deception. He also explained that the Revolutionary Army's purpose had always been more than an illusion, and it was to kill Imu to restore the balance of the world. Sabo, the guy who thought his whole purpose was just to kill the celestial dragon and overcome his past, clenched his fists, but he said nothing. The revolutionary base at Baltigo became their sanctuary and their crucible. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo stayed there for months, surrounded by the whispers of the pirate world recovering from chaos. Whitebeard died after the battle, and now Marco was the one leading them. The world started seeing all three brothers as living legends, but among Baltigo's white stone halls, they were only regular fighters rebuilding themselves to get stronger than ever before. From the shadows, Rayleigh came. The former Dark King watched everyone from the shadows since Marineford, and Dragon's message also reached him. He came here as a mentor and trained all three brothers to transform them into complete killers. Luffy's grief turned into steel during Rayleigh's sessions. He was no longer just the rubber man who stretched and smiled through pain. Rayleigh forced him to fight blindfolded and sense an opponent's intent before the blow even happened. Luffy's Conqueror's Haki really evolved here, and he achieved the power to see a few glimpses into the future. Under extreme conditions, Luffy also learned to code his attacks with willpower, learning advanced Conqueror's Haki, and now his fists no longer needed to touch to strike. But his aura, long like Shanks, could split the ground into two parts. Sabo was being trained by none other than Dragon himself, but this time he learned Ryosoken in a way he never had before. Dragon taught him to use the elemental powers of heat, wind, and armament Haki. Through months of experimentation, Sabo discovered a technique that would redefine his whole aura, a new form called Dragon Flame Fusion. By channeling heat into compressed streams of air, he created shockwaves that burned and sliced. Once used, his fists would become firestorms shaped like dragons, and anyone who touched them would burn to death. He also learned basic combat and how to fight with people without having to depend on his abilities. Needless to say, Sabo became one of the strongest characters the pirate and marine world had ever seen. He also achieved Armament Awakening, an advanced state where Haki is not only coded on his body, but also extended as an aura field. Lastly, the man who was haunted by failure to protect Whitebeard and burdened by the deaths of thousands that occurred due to his simple capture, Ace's transformation would be the hardest. His fire Logia had always been a weapon of chaos, but now he wanted to transform it into a level that no one had ever seen. Initially, he wanted to train with Shanks, but obviously, Shanks would never be free to train someone else. So, he trained under Dragon and Rayleigh, mastering internal heat manipulation. For weeks and weeks, he meditated in volcanic caverns, controlling temperature until magma cooled at his command. Just breathing there was hard, and he became a trained killer. And one night, something crazy happened. While fighting with Rayleigh, his flames turned blue, and the heat was so intense that even the Dark King had to retreat right away. In this state, his flame emitted no sound, no ash, but only light. The destructive power was so great that he became nearly Yonko level. His attacks were Solar Nova, Blue Emperor Burst, and Final Awakening. Ace finally surpassed the fire of hatred and grief that once consumed him. The three brothers trained for 2 years in secrecy, and their powers were already evolving beyond recognition. Now, they were ready to take back their friends, and the rebirth of the D bloodline had just begun. After losing his arm, many believed that Shanks' prime had already ended, but they were completely wrong. Instead, Shanks was way ahead of everyone and knew the secrets of what makes Emu, and was interested in his own origins. It was only Shanks who knew the secrets of Emu, the Five Elders, and others. Now, moving to Kurigana Island, where nothing but ruins were everywhere, Roronoa Zoro stood before the world's greatest swordsman, Draculae Mihawk. Luffy thought that Zoro had also died on the battlefield because they had never heard from him. But after learning the fate of the Straw Hats, Zoro wanted to train with the man whom he secretly admired the most, and that was Mihawk. Mihawk, being as stoic as ever, accepted Zoro's challenge. Their training was merciless, and every strike tested Zoro's resolve and his soul. He learned to read the flow of killing intent. From there, Zoro awakened Observation Haki and Armament Haki to the next level. His most profound evolution came when he started showing signs of King's Haki, which even Mihawk was surprised by. There were months of relentless duels, weightlifting, drinking booze, and Zoro became a badass no one would even recognize. That's because he did countless missions for Mihawk and became the only person Mihawk ever wanted to be with, except Perona. By the end of his training, Zoro's power rivaled even the brothers of the D lineage, and with his new technique called Aceral Ghost Emperor form, he merged his spirit with the blade, manifesting 9 spectral arms of energy that he could strike with amazing precision. Using this attack, he also injured Mihawk in a battle, which was rare to see. Mihawk was so impressed that he gave Zoro his own blade, Yoru. For centuries, the world government had ruled unchallenged, hiding behind propaganda. Now, Luffy, Ace, and Sabo, side by side once more, bearing the crest of flame, dragon, and freedom, were here. Behind them were Dragon's revolutionaries, the Whitebeard forces, and many other New World pirates. The assault began in 3 waves. Firstly, revolutionary warships breached the lower gates of Mary Jawaz, tearing through the sea-level defenses. Sabo was in charge here and was fighting proudly with his armament Haki-infused flames. His opponent was Admiral Fujitora, who came from the sky. The two clashed mid-air, with meteors shattering as Sabo's dragon-like attacks met Fujitora's gravitational storms. At first, the battle was one-sided, but very soon, Sabo's dragon flame burst countered Fujitora's crushing gravity, and the explosion of this light was visible across the red line. Both warriors stood their ground, and here one was fighting for freedom while the other was looking for justice. Ace, this time, met his destiny. Across the the scorched battlefield, he saw Sakazuki, the man who ended his life in another timeline. The heat between them was something else, but this time, Ace's blue fire was too much for him to handle. Their clash was apocalyptic, where fire and magma collided. But in the end, Ace moved with a speed that he had never before, and stabbed Sakazuki in the same way Sakazuki liked to stab others, ultimately killing him. On the other hand, Ace used his flame dragon form, transforming into a hybrid transformation that he hadn't fully mastered yet. However, even that was enough to knock Fujitora across the 7 seas with his powers. Elsewhere, Luffy tore through the marine lines, but Kizaru appeared before him. This time, Luffy was different, and every single Yasakani no Magatama attack that Kizaru sent at him, he advanced through with his Conqueror's Haki. Sengoku and Garp appeared before everyone. Dragon was once again fighting, but all were relentless in beating each other until something crazy happened. High above the chaos, Dragon stood before the 5 elders. They were coming down slowly, and even the Marines didn't know the figure behind them. It was Imu. As soon as Imu came down, all the elders bowed with the air bending in reverence to the figure that just emerged. He told everyone that no one here would remain, whether Marine or pirate, because he wanted to reset the world and end everything. He told the 5 elders to go and have fun with everyone while he laughed in the shadows. The chaos erupted in a way that the Straw Hats and many other prisoners were also released from. Right outside, they met Luffy, and while they were all sad about Frankie, Usopp, and Zoro, who they thought had died, suddenly a menacing aura came onto the battlefield, and it was Zoro and Mihawk. Elsewhere, Shanks also appeared, and the whole battlefield was about to erupt in a battle that hadn't ended before. Seeing this madness, even the Marine leaders were against Imu, with Sengoku and Garp refusing to stand down, ready to fight him. The final battle began, and each elder stepped forward with their forms shifting into monstrous manifestations of the forgotten divinity. The boy known as Figureland Garling, with his crimson eyes, looked at Shanks. This was a bloodline versus bloodline battle because Shanks knew he was related to the elder. Their clash was crazy and long, with Figureland using his Haki against Shanks. Their battle was long but rough. However, Shanks ultimately defeated St. Garling Figureland with divine departure, something the elder wasn't ready for. Mihawk and Zoro tried fighting Imu, but they didn't even know where the attacks were coming from. They tried their best to attack the shadow, but it kept disappearing and reappearing. On the other hand, it was Dragon who defeated the Elder of Gravity, and Ace and Sabo fought 2 elders who wielded time and avoided each other. Ultimately, they all came together and defeated all the elders, only to find them getting consumed by Imu, who became even stronger than before. The island shifted into a living hell with volcanoes everywhere and skeletal figures coming out from the ground. Those undead were as strong as Brook and were fighting everyone. Now, it was up to our heroes to kill Imu, but how could they even begin to think about something that didn't even manifest itself properly? The battle started, and Luffy dashed forward with his Gomu Gomu attacks, but he got annihilated by Imu. Everyone thought he had died, but then the sound of Joy Boy began to beat, and this time, Luffy was laughing with fun and rage, telling Imu that he would kill him for taking the lives of his friends. He moved forward with future sight, and tiny fractions of seconds were unfolding before him. His fist ignited with joy-infused will, and Gigant Bajrang gun detonated everywhere. Besides him was Sabo, who became a cyclone of dragon fire and steel, and his fire transformation was complete. Ace and Zoro were also attacking the Mad Elf, whose whole purpose was to kill and rewrite history at this point. Whenever our heroes attacked, Imu struck back with eternal darkness, a void that negated form and memory. This dimmed the whole world, but Luffy's advanced conquerors Haki and Sabo's awakened Haki were fighting in synergy, and when Imu attempted to rewrite them by erasing their names, pulling memories into nothing, Luffy unleashed Emperor's Hammer, a conqueror-laced blow that was the size of a mountain, and for the first time, Imu was hit because he couldn't disappear. Sabo used Dragon's Maw, a spiraling inferno that compressed the void into a coiling core of pressure, and that also hit Imu, burning him in the worst way possible. Everyone struck at once, and in a matter of time, Imu's silhouette fractured into pieces of nothingness that ultimately vanished. The eternal darkness that was everywhere also collapsed and imploded, making light prevail once again. The whole landscape came back to normal, and for the first time, both the Marines and the pirates lowered their weapons. Some names still remained, and memories stayed. Some of the heroes lost their lives in this battle, but the greater evil was now gone. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more One Piece videos.